What happens when the people you're supposed to trust the most become your greatest threat? When the sanctuary of home transforms into a battleground and love curdles into a bitter poison, can anyone truly escape? Prepare to uncover the dark secrets that shatter a family, revealing the terrifying cost of unspoken resentments and desperate ultimatums. The flickering candlelight barely softened the sharp edges of the tension hanging heavy in the air. Forks clinked against porcelain, a rhythm that was less comforting, more a countdown. Sarah, her jaw clenched, watched her father carve the roast, each slice a deliberate act of ignorance. Her mother, too, offered a tight, practiced smile, eyes darting, avoiding. Could they truly pretend? Could anyone? This wasn't dinner. It was a performance, a charade of normalcy crumbling with every shallow breath. The silence, stretched thin as old lace, hummed with unspoken accusations, with years of hurt festering beneath the polite veneer. It was suffocating. Every molecule of air seemed charged with an impending storm. Then, Sarah's chair scraped back, a shriek of defiance against the forced quiet. Her voice, raw and ragged, tore through the fragile peace. "Enough!" she screamed, her eyes blazing, fixed on her family's startled faces. "You have 48 hours to leave." The words hung, a death sentence, shattering the illusion, promising a storm far deadlier than anyone could have imagined. What had driven her to this brink? What unspeakable horrors lurked beneath their perfect facade? The answers would be devastating. The silence that followed Sarah's declaration was heavier, more profound than any that had come before. It wasn't the polite, brittle quiet of moments ago. This was the silence of a bomb having just dropped. Its echo deafening. Elena, Sarah's mother, felt a cold dread seep into her bones, chilling her from the inside out. Her fork, still clutched in her hand, trembled, threatening to clatter against the untouched roast on her plate. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. Not Sarah. Her quiet, withdrawn Sarah, capable of such a thing. What had festered so deeply within her daughter? A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the antique silverware, a vibration that spoke of deeper cracks than anyone dared acknowledge. The silverware had been a wedding gift from a grandmother Elena hadn't spoken to in decades, a rift that mirrored the one now splitting her family. This wasn't just Sarah's anger. It felt like an ancient curse finally manifesting. Her husband, Robert, usually so composed, had frozen mid-motion, his carving knife still poised above the half-sliced meat, a tableau of domestic horror. His face, normally a mask of polite indifference, was now pale, almost Asian. He looked at Sarah, then Archie Elena, a flicker of bewildered accusation in his eyes. He expected her to fix this, as he always did, but Elena felt the sheer audacity of Sarah's demand. 48 hours to vacate their own home was a slap, a punch, a twisting knife all at once. It wasn't just a threat. It felt like a declaration of war. What unspoken resentment could possibly ignite such fury? Elena suddenly remembered a whispered conversation she'd overheard years ago. Sarah crying to a younger brother, Leo, about something precious stolen from her room, an incident Elena had dismissed as childish squabbling. Could that tiny seed of betrayal have grown into this monstrosity? The thought was a chilling whisper in her mind. Sarah stood, a defiant silhouette against the flickering candlelight, her chest heaving, the raw edges of her voice, so uncharacteristic, still hung in the air, a physical weight. Her gaze, usually downcast or evasive, was now direct, blazing with a terrifying resolve that Elena had never seen directed at them. It wasn't the petulant rage of a child. This was the cold, cutting fury of someone pushed beyond their limit, someone who had planned this meticulously. The realization hit Elena with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't spontaneous. This was calculated. She recalled Sarah's unusual silence over the past few months. Not just her typical quiet, but an unsettling emptiness. A void where there used to be even small protests or requests. Sarah had been watching them, observing, collecting ammunition. What secrets had Sarah unearthed in that silence? Robert finally lowered the carving knife, its sharp edge glinting menacingly in the dim light. "Sarah," he began, his voice surprisingly calm, almost paternal, a dangerous calm. "What in God's name are you talking about? This is your home." He motioned around the grand dining room, filled with heirlooms and the scent of expensive polish. He tried to appeal to her sense of belonging, to the shared history woven into the very fabric of the house. But the words fell flat, hollow, echoing in the sudden, cavernous space between them. The house, with its imposing facade and manicured gardens, was more than just bricks and mortars. It was Robert's legacy, a symbol of everything he believed he had achieved, built on foundations that were perhaps less solid than he pretended. The true cost of maintaining that facade was about to be revealed. Sarah didn't flinch. Her eyes, still burning, moved from her father to her mother, a silent accusation. "My home," she scoffed, the word dripping with venom. "This has never been my home. It's been a gilded cage, a stage for your perfect little play, and I'm done playing my part." Her gaze lingered on Elena, a silent challenge that made Elena's stomach clench. It was a look that promised a deeper, more personal reckoning. A cold finger of fear traced down Elena's spine. What specific part did Sarah resent so fiercely? Elena remembered forcing Sarah into piano lessons. Despite the child's obvious insisting it was good for her future, a future Elena had meticulously, perhaps selfishly, mapped out, was that one of the countless small betrayals that fueled this inferno? The weight of Sarah's words, "I'm done playing my part," pressed down on Elena. She thought of Sarah's early years, a bright, curious child, slowly fading into a shadow, a dutiful daughter. The family had always prioritized appearances, projecting an image of effortless success and harmony. Robert's career, the charity galas, the perfectly orchestrated holidays, everything had to be flawless. Sarah, a sensitive child, had often been quietly chastised for not conforming, for not smiling enough, for daring to have an opinion that deviated from the script. There was the incident with the school play, where Sarah, against her wishes, had been made to give up the lead role to a Donner's daughter, a decision Elena had supported for the greater good of Robert's connections. The memory now felt like a lead weight in her chest. "You speak of a gilded cage," Robert said, his voice now edged with a dangerous coolness, "but we gave you everything, everything you ever wanted." He gestured vaguely, encompassing the visible luxury of their lives. He couldn't comprehend Sarah's perception, blinded by his own narrative of generous provision. He truly believed he had been a good father, that he had provided a perfect life. This disconnect was a chasm that had widened over years, unnoticed by him, but meticulously charted by Sarah. He conveniently forgot the countless times Sarah had asked for something intangible, time, attention, understanding, only to be given another expensive gift, a material substitute for true connection. The gifts were meant to silence, not to nurture. Sarah let out a bitter laugh, a sound devoid of humor. "Everything I wanted. You gave me everything, Asterix. You Asterix wanted me to want. You never asked what I desired, what I needed." Her voice cracked slightly, a momentary glimpse of the pain beneath the fury. But it quickly hardened again. "You curated my life, my friends, even my thoughts. And when I dared to step outside your carefully constructed box..." Her voice trailed off, but the unspoken accusation hung heavy, a promise of past injustices now demanding their due. Elena remembered the fight when Sarah wanted to go to art school, a dream brutally crushed by Robert, who insisted on a sensible business degree, a moment that had extinguished a vital spark in her daughter's eyes. That fight hadn't just ended with Sarah's capitulation. It had begun something far more sinister. Elena felt a rising nausea. She had always played the peacemaker, the silent enabler, smoothing over Robert's harshness, justifying their choices. But Sarah's words were a direct assault on her complicity. She saw now, with horrifying clarity, the years of small sacrifices, small suppressions that had carved this path. Sarah wasn't just accusing Robert, she was accusing Elena too, for her silent participation, for her fear of rocking the boat. And the boat, it now seemed, was capsizing. A flicker of a memory, a younger Elena, contemplating leaving Robert, packed bags hidden in the attic, only to unpack them again, paralyzed by the fear of societal judgment and financial ruin. That moment of cowardice had sealed not just her fate, but perhaps Sarah's too. "This isn't about material things, is it, Sarah?" Elena finally managed, her voice a thin whisper, barely audible above the ringing in her ears. She looked at her daughter, looked asterisk at her, and saw not just anger, but a profound, aching sorrow. It was a sorrow that had been nurtured in the shadows, growing quietly, until it consumed everything. "What? ... What did we do?" The question was sincere, raw, an admission of guilt she hadn't known she carried until this very second. The unspeakable horrors the previous passage hinted at began to coalesce, not as grand, dramatic events, but as 1,000 tiny cuts, a slow poisoning of a spirit, a gradual erasure of self, orchestrated perhaps unwittingly by those who claimed to love her most. The true horror lay in the banality of their cruelty. Sarah's eyes narrowed, a glint of something akin to pity flashing through the fury. "You want to know what you did?" she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous calm, more chilling than her previous screams. "You made me disappear. You erased me. And now it's your turn." The implication was terrifying. This wasn't just about them leaving. It was about reversing a lifetime of perceived wrongs, about Sarah reclaiming her existence by destroying theirs. The 48 hours weren't just a deadline. They were a countdown to their own erasure. There was a box tucked away in Sarah's old room, filled with faded photographs, journal entries, and a single yellowed newspaper clipping about a local art competition Sarah had won at 16, a victory never acknowledged by her parents. That forgotten box held the true narrative of her vanishing. Robert, finding his voice again, finally stood, his chair scraping back with a jarring protest. "This is absurd! You're deranged! You can't just throw us out of our own home." His face was blotchy red now, the veneer of calm shattered, replaced by sputtering indignation. He moved as if to physically confront her, to reassert his patriarchal authority, to put an end to this madness through sheer force of will. But Sarah merely held his gaze, unwavering. He remembered the lawyers he'd hired years ago, not for any personal legal trouble, but to quietly discourage Sarah from pursuing certain unsuitable friendships, a discreet exercise of control he considered prudent parenting. The legal machinery he relied on to protect his interests might now be turned against him. "Watch me," Sarah replied, her voice steady, cold as winter ice. "You taught me everything I know about control, about leverage, about making people disappear." A chilling smile, devoid of joy, touched her lips. "And I've learned well." The implication was clear. Sarah had played by their rules, learned their game, and now she was playing to win, with a ruthlessness that mirrored their own. The storm, once only threatened, had broken. The devastation was only just beginning. The silence after Sarah's pronouncement was a physical weight, crushing the air from his lungs. Fury drained, leaving behind a cold, hollow dread. 48 hours. The number echoed in his mind. Absurd, impossible. This grand house, bedrock of his existence, was to be dismantled, item by precious item, or simply left for Sarah. He looked around the opulent living room, every piece a monument to his constructed life, now just debris. A faint tremor started in his hands, mirroring a brief, unsettling fear he'd felt years ago when she was a child. What dark premonition had whispered to him back then? He stumbled towards his study, a desperate need for the familiar comfort of his leather-bound books. But even there, the air felt alien, charged with Sarah's chilling smile. The thought of his own daughter orchestrating the systematic dismantling of his world was a bitter pill. He remembered dismissing his unease, chalking it up to irrational parental paranoia. He stared at his reflection in the polished desk, seeing not the powerful man he believed himself, but a bewildered old man, cornered. How had he so thoroughly misjudged the depth of her resolve? The clock on the mantelpiece seemed to tick louder, each second a hammer blow he had to Pocky. But what did one pack when an entire life was deemed disposable? His gaze fell upon a framed photograph. A younger Sarah, clutching a brightly colored drawing, her smile wide and unburdened. He'd kept it there, a testament to a different time. A daughter he'd barely recognized. He'd often told himself their distance was natural. Was it really that simple, or had he subtly contributed to the hardening of her spirit? His wife, Eleanor, sat motionless on the edge of the sofa, a statue of grief. She hadn't spoken since Sarah's final words, her face a mask of shocked disbelief. He wanted to comfort her, but the words stuck in his throat, thick with his own terror. He knew she blamed him, silently, for this catastrophe. The silence between them was a chasm, wider than any disagreement. What forgotten promise, what broken trust had created this irreparable rift between them? He started in his study, aimlessly pulling books from shelves. Each volume, a story, a memory, a trophy. The complete works of Shakespeare, a gift from his father on his graduation, now seemed heavy with irony. He saw an old diary tucked away behind a row of legal texts, untouched for decades, whose faded pages held secrets about their family's origins, and why had it been so carefully concealed? He hesitated, then pushed it back, the urge to confront old ghosts overridden by the present. The sheer volume of his possessions was overwhelming. 40 years of accumulation, of acquisitions, of objects imbued with significance, now just clutter. He opened a drawer, revealing a collection of antique watches, each one a testament to a successful deal, a celebrated milestone. Sarah had once admired these, her small fingers tracing the cold metal. Had he always misinterpreted her interest as admiration rather than a budding understanding of the power these objects represented? The image of Sarah's cold, triumphant smile replayed in his mind, a constant "You taught me everything I know about control, about leverage, about making people disappear." Her words, delivered with chilling precision, were a testament to her meticulous planning, her relentless pursuit of this moment. He'd dismissed her, underestimated her. How many years had she spent silently observing, absorbing, and ultimately plotting this elaborate downfall? He moved to the master bedroom, the one sacred space now feeling like a tomb. Eleanor still hadn't moved. He found himself mechanically folding shirts, his movements stiff. He pulled out an old, faded baby blanket from a cedar chest, a blanket Sarah had used. A sudden, sharp memory, Sarah, as an infant, cooing in his arms. When had that powerful, protective instinct curdled into the need for absolute control, twisting their bond beyond recognition? He picked up a heavy photo album, flipping through pages filled with carefully arranged snapshots of family vacations, Christmases, birthdays. Each picture, a curated memory, presenting an idealized version of their lives. He stopped at a photo of Sarah, about 5 years old, standing alone on a beach, her back to the camera, staring out at the vast ocean. He remembered that day. She had wandered off, lost in thought. Had her early detachment always been a silent protest against the life he was building for her, a life she never truly wanted? 2 days. A lifetime reduced to 2 days. He pictured Sarah in her new office, a corner suite undoubtedly, orchestrating his downfall with the same cold efficiency he had once admired, even taught. He remembered telling her, "Never show weakness,
Sarah.
Always be 2 steps ahead." He had meant it as guidance, a lesson in survival. Had he inadvertently armed her with the very weapons that would now destroy him? Or had she merely perfected a ruthless streak that was already inherent, lying dormant? The weight of his legacy, twisted and weaponized, was almost unbearable. He had created his own executioner. The task ahead was monumental, but more than that, it was a profound act of every item he touched, every shadow in the empty rooms, whispered Sarah's words, her accusations, her triumph. He wasn't just packing boxers. He was packing away a lifetime of assumptions, a legacy of control, and a future he no longer recognized. The clock continued its relentless march, each tick a reminder of the swift, devastating end to everything he had ever known. The silence, punctuated only by the distant hum of the city, was now just a canvas for his unraveling thoughts. Sarah surveyed the city from her new office, the glass wall a testament to her ascent. The view was exactly as she'd imagined, sprawling, powerful, entirely hers. The air in the corner suite felt crisper, charged with the hum of success she'd won. Every carefully planned maneuver, every late night, had culminated in this perfect, undisputed triumph. Yet, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through her, a whisper of something unsettled amidst the victory. She brushed it off as residual adrenaline. Was it truly just that? Though, she still hadn't returned her mother's calls from yesterday, a stack of them now ignored on her assistant's desk. The next day, a casual lunch with an old colleague turned strangely subdued. He spoke of the restructuring with an odd reference, then quickly changed the subject when Sarah probed for details about her brother's transition. His averted gaze, the way his fork scraped against the plate a little too loudly, spoke volumes that his words deliberately avoided. It was a fleeting interaction, but the memory lingered, like a faint, unpleasant aftertaste in her Victoria champagne. She wondered what secrets his silence harbored. She had seen the vacant look in her brother's eyes during the final board meeting, a look she chose to dismiss as resignation. A week later, the family dinner was less a celebration and more a silent inquisition. Her father, usually boisterous, was withdrawn, offering only monosyllabic responses. Her mother, whose perpetual smile often masked deeper emotions, kept her eyes fixed on Sarah, a gaze that felt heavy with unspoken disappointment. The usual banter was absent, replaced by a suffocating quiet that pressed in from all sides. Sarah found herself picking at her food, a strange knot forming in her stomach. What was it they weren't saying? Her younger cousin, Liam, had pointedly avoided eye contact with her the entire evening, a first for the usually adoring boy. The atmosphere thickened when a distant aunt, usually oblivious to corporate politics, mentioned her brother's departure with a sigh, noting how he looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. The words, though seemingly innocent, struck Sarah with an unexpected force. She quickly interjected, trying to steer the conversation back to her own achievements, but the seed was planted. It wasn't just business. It was personal, profoundly so. The weight of her aunt's casual observation felt disproportionately heavy. What did she know? She caught her mother exchanging a worried glance with her father across the table, a silent conversation unfolding without her. The following Monday, Sarah spotted her brother in the lobby of the building, a place he hadn't frequented since the takeover. He wasn't there for a meeting. He was simply carrying a worn cardboard box, its contents presumably the last remnants of his old life. His shoulders were slumped, his usually immaculate suit rough. His eyes, when they briefly met hers across the marble expanse, held a haunted emptiness that sent a jolt through her. It wasn't the defiance she'd expected, but something far worse. Was this the cost of her ambition? He didn't acknowledge her, merely continued his slow, deliberate walk towards the exit, as if she no longer existed in his world. That night, sleep eluded her. The image of her brother's hollow eyes replayed in her mind, a stark contrast to the triumphant gleam she'd cultivated in her own. The quiet hum of her expansive apartment, once a symbol of her freedom, now felt cavernous and cold. She thought of her early days under his mentorship, the trust in his eyes, the pride he'd taken in her sharp intellect. Those memories, once cherished, now felt like accusations. Had she truly understood the full implications? She remembered his old office, now hers, and a faint chill settled over her at the thought of the empty space he'd left behind. A few days later, a mutual friend, someone who had always admired both siblings, called Sarah. His tone was clipped, devoid of his usual jovial warmth. He spoke about her brother's struggle to adjust, about the unexpected difficulty in finding new opportunities given the public nature of the hostile takeover. He always put the company first, Sarah, the friend said, his voice laced with an undeniable edge of judgment. He truly believed in loyalty. The conversation ended abruptly, leaving Sarah with a bitter taste. Loyalty? Was that what she'd betrayed? She realized the friend hadn't once congratulated her on her success, a glaring omission she'd previously overlooked. The once celebrated reports of the company's new direction now seemed to mock her. The market had responded positively, yes, but the human cost was becoming undeniable. She saw the faces of long-term employees, now under her command, who avoided her gaze, their loyalty still seemingly tied to her brother. The whispers in the hallways, once about her brilliance, now occasionally hinted at ruthlessness, a word that felt like a brand on her skin. The perfect victory was beginning to tarnish, revealing an ugly underside. What had she truly gained? She noticed her assistant, usually effervescent, had become noticeably quieter, her smiles less genuine around Sarah. Her mother finally cornered her during a terse Sunday brunch. "He's not himself, Sarah," she said, her voice low and filled with pain. "He doesn't eat. He barely leaves the house." Her mother's eyes welled up, a sight Sarah hadn't seen in years. "You two were inseparable once. What have you done?" The direct accusation, though gently delivered, pierced through Sarah's carefully constructed defenses. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about tearing apart the fabric of their family. Could she repair this? Her mother mentioned a box of old photographs her brother had been sorting through, pictures of their childhood, now scattered and forgotten. The words echoed in her mind. What have you done? The corner office, the power, the respect, it all felt hollow now. The exhilaration of the victory was replaced by a gnawing emptiness, a growing unease. She remembered her brother teaching her to ride a bike, patiently holding the seat, his encouraging smile. She remembered him defending her against bullies, standing up for her, always. He had been her protector, her mentor, and she, in her pursuit of ambition, had become his undoing. The realization was a cold, hard stone in her chest. A forgotten voice from her past, a warning about unchecked ambition, suddenly resurfaced with startling clarity, a ghost of a memory. The triumph felt like ashes. She saw not the gleaming corporation, but the shattered reflection of her brother's life. The subtle cues from her family had culminated into an undeniable symphony of sorrow and disapproval. The seeds of doubt, once mere specks, had taken root, blossoming into a thorny bush of regret. The price of her victory was starkly clear, laid bare by his suffering. The empire she had built was tainted, its foundation built upon a brother's ruin. The future she had so meticulously planned now felt terrifyingly uncertain. She wondered if, beneath a relentless drive, a part of her had always feared this very outcome. This profound sense of isolation, the quiet despair she observed in him, the hollow echoes of his former life, resonated deeply within her. It was a mirror of a different kind, reflecting not her success, but the gaping wound she had inflicted. The weight of her actions, once justified as strategic, now bore the unmistakable burden of betrayal. The game was over, the prize secured, but the victory tasted bitter, a lingering poison in her soul. She wondered if the glittering future she had seized would forever be overshadowed by the ghost of her brother's ruin, a silent accusation in every echo of her success. The silence in the opulent, yet sterile, living room was a living, breathing entity, heavier than the priceless artwork adorning the walls. Amelia watched her brother, Liam, across the vast expanse of polished mahogany, his slumped shoulders a testament to a spirit irrevocably fractured. Each tick of the grandfather clock echoed the relentless march of her guilt, a drumbeat in her temples. She had expected anger, an explosion, but instead there was only this profound, chilling stillness. A quiet observation from his therapist, relayed by their mother, had indicated Liam rarely left his room now. What had truly broken him beyond repair? She swallowed, the knot in her throat a tight, suffocating ball. He wouldn't even meet her gaze, preferring the vacant stare at the intricately patterned rug. It was a coward's refusal, or perhaps a sign of a deeper, unyielding pain she couldn't yet fathom. The grand windows, usually a source of light, now seemed to frame the gray, unforgiving sky, mirroring the landscape of her soul. This wasn't the victory she'd envisioned. The Empire felt like a gilded cage. He had barely spoken since the news of her takeover. Had her ambition blinded her to the very core of his being, leaving him exposed? Amelia took a shaky breath, the air suddenly thin. Liam, her voice was a raw, unfamiliar rasp, barely a whisper in the cavernous room. He flinched, a subtle tremor that rippled through his entire frame, but still, he kept his eyes averted. It was a rejection more potent than any shouted curse. She remembered a time when his laughter had filled these very halls. Where had that vibrant spirit gone? I need to say something. The words felt inadequate, hollow, before they even left her lips. She had practiced this moment 1,000 times in her head, refining the perfect apology. But now, faced with his brokenness, all those carefully constructed phrases crumbled into dust. She wondered if he'd ever truly forgive her for what she'd done, or if this chasm between them was permanent. His stillness was unnerving, an almost theatrical performance of indifference. Yet his clenched fists, hidden beneath the table, told a different story. They spoke of a simmering rage, carefully contained, a volcano waiting for the first crack in the earth. She saw a flicker in his peripheral vision, a momentary shift that hinted at the battle raging within him. What was he holding back? What deep wound was still festering beneath his calm exterior? "I know words won't fix it," she continued, her voice gaining a fragile strength, "but I have to try. I was wrong. So incredibly, terribly wrong." The admission hung in the air, a fragile offering. She had never admitted fault so openly. Not to anyone, least of all to him, her longtime rival. He remained motionless, a statue carved from grief and resentment. She had always believed their rivalry was healthy, a fuel for both their successes. Never realizing the damage it was inflicting, had she always been the one pushing the boundaries too far? The memory of their father's quiet disappointment, often directed at her, resurfaced unbidden. Even then, she had dismissed it as weakness. "I stripped you of everything, didn't I?" The question was rhetorical, a statement of undeniable truth that felt like a hot poker to her own heart. She saw the almost imperceptible tensing of his jaw. There was a secret here, a layer beneath the visible pain, something she hadn't touched upon, a vulnerability she had exploited without even knowing its depth. She had seen his passion for the company, his life's work, as a weakness to be exploited, not a sacred trust. He had given so much of himself. She now understood the true cost of her ambition, not just to him, but to herself, to their family. The silence was punctuated only by the distant murmur of the city, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in the room. His eyes finally, slowly lifted, meeting hers. They were not filled with anger, but with an agonizing, almost desolate emptiness that made her stomach churn. It was worse than any accusation. It was the look of someone who had lost everything, including the will to fight. What further betrayal had she not yet uncovered? What lie had she told herself about their relationship to justify her actions? She had always viewed him as soft, a dreamer, unworthy of the Empire's reigns. But was that truly the truth? Or a convenient narrative she'd constructed to fuel her own ruthless drive? He opened his mouth, and for a fleeting second, she braced herself for an outburst, a torrent of deserved fury. Instead, a dry, humorless chuckle escaped his lips, a sound utterly devoid of mirth, chilling her to the bone. Wrong, Amelia. You are meticulous. Clinical. You planned this for years. His voice was raspy, unused, yet each word was delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. He knew more than she thought. Far more about her inner machinations. It was a revelation that unnerved her, exposing her carefully hidden motives. She hadn't just acted impulsively. This was a calculated siege. And he had seen it all along. The air crackled with a new kind of tension. Not just her guilt, but his cold, almost academic dissection of her actions. This wasn't just about their company. It was about the very fabric of their shared history. What other secrets of her plotting had he unearthed? He pushed a hand through his disheveled hair, a gesture that spoke of profound exhaustion. Not just physical, but you always wanted it all, didn't you? And you were willing to burn everything down to get it. He wasn't accusing, merely stating a fact. A truth so stark, it cut her deeper than any curse. But there was something in his eyes, a glint, a flicker of something she couldn't quite place, a hidden sorrow beyond the obvious. It was as if he understood her on a level she hadn't even grasped herself. What was the source of this deep, underlying sadness that seemed to precede her actions? Could she have been blind to his pain for so long? Not just the pain she inflicted, but something else entirely. I thought I was strong, she confessed, the words tumbling out, raw and unplanned. I thought that being ruthless was strength. I saw vulnerability as weakness. I saw your empathy, your kindness as weakness. The admission was like a physical blow, exposing a core belief she had held onto for decades, a belief forged in the crucible of their ambitious family. It was a truth she had buried deep, even from herself. Was this the root of her rage, this fear of perceived weakness? Had she always been running from her own softness? His gaze intensified, no longer empty, but piercing, as if he was seeing into her very soul, beyond the facade she had so painstakingly built. "And now," he asked, his voice low, dangerous, yet tinged with a faint, unreadable curiosity. "Do you still see it that way? Or has your empire, built on rubble, finally shown you the true face of weakness?" The question hung, a barbed hook forcing her to confront the terrifying emptiness of her victory. The true measure of her ruthlessness had been his destruction. But what about her own vulnerability, the ones that had fueled her relentless pursuit? She felt a tremor of fear, a primal dread she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge before. She had always prided herself on being impenetrable, unbreakable, but now she felt a profound fragility, a sense of having lost her way. There was a moment, a fleeting beat, where she saw not Liam, but her own reflection in his wounded eyes, a reflection of a woman desperately afraid of her own shadow. Was she capable of making amends? Or was she too consumed by the very darkness she had embraced? Her meticulously constructed facade crumbled, not in a grand explosion, but in a silent, internal implosion. The Empire felt like a hollow tomb. She saw not the victor she had strived to be, but a woman stripped bare by her own ambition, haunted by the ghost of the brother she had sacrificed. "It was never worth it, Liam," she whispered, her voice raw, fractured. "The power, the control. It was all a desperate attempt to fill a void that only grew wider with every step I took away from you." Tears, long suppressed, finally welled, blurring his face. "I destroyed us. I chose ambition over blood. And now I have nothing but the echoes of what we could have been." She reached out, a trembling hand, not for absolution, but for a connection, however fleeting. Liam watched her, his expression a complex tapestry of pain, resentment, and something akin to pity. The bitterness was still there, a deep chasm, but beneath it, a faint flicker. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition, a shared history, a shared loss. His silence stretched, a heavy shroud. He didn't embrace her, didn't offer a word of comfort, but he didn't turn away. The chasm between them was real, carved by years of neglect and deliberate cruelty. Forgiveness wasn't a commodity to be granted, nor was reconciliation a simple path. It was a long, arduous journey, perhaps one they would never complete. The ultimatum wasn't a single spoken threat, but the cumulative weight of her choices, leaving an indelible scar. Yet, in that shared silence, a fragile possibility emerged, not of forgetting, but of understanding, not of erasing the past, but of acknowledging its weight. They were two broken halves of a shattered whole, forever marked by their history, yet now, for the first time in years, truly seeing each other. The empire was gone, replaced by the stark reality of two souls, irrevocably altered, standing on the precipice of an uncertain, yet undeniably real future. And in that desolate shared gaze, they began to measure the true cost of an empire built on the ruins of a broken heart, knowing some wounds may never fully heal, but can, perhaps, learn to breathe. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the depths of human emotion, please like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that challenge the heart.